Hi everyone, my name is Hassan and in this video we are going to talk about claim check pattern. Claim check pattern comes under messaging category of cloud design patterns. Although this pattern comes primarily under messaging category, it still touches on other categories like performance enhancements and reliability, as we are going to see in details in this video. So what's going on in the claim check pattern is about splitting a large message content into a claim check and a payload. And then we are going to send the claim check to the messaging platform and then storing the payload in an external service. The external service could be a cloud-based storage, like a blob storage or even a database. And we are going to see this in more details in a minute. Let's say that we have a publisher and subscriber and we are communicating between them asynchronously using Azure Service Bus queues. So the publisher is going to publish messages to Azure Service Bus queue, and from the other side, the subscriber is going to consume those messages from the queue. And so far, we don't have any problems, until the publisher wants to send a really large message to the queue. And this is when it's going to be problematic for us. Generally speaking, if we are going to send a really large message to a service bus, it's gonna consume a lot of resources and bandwidth of your message bus technology. And actually, it's not even recommended to be use a large messages in a service bus technology, because this large message could slow down the entire solution. Also, there are different limits on the message sizes that you can send to different message bus technologies, and we are going to see them in more details in a minute. So we have two limits in here. First limit is the limit on the message size that we can send to the different Azure Service Bus technologies. And the second limit is if you even manage to get your messages to be just under those limits, it's still going to be a problem for your architecture, because one large message could slow down the entire solution, and it's going to consume a lot of resources and bandwidth of your architecture. Now let's have a quick look at the limits on the different Azure Service Bus technologies. And the first one we are going to talk about is the Azure Storage Queues, and the maximum message size it supports is up to 64Ks. While for Azure Service Bus Queues, the maximum message size it supports is between 256Ks to 1 mega based on your tier. So if you are going to use the standard tier, the maximum message size is going to be 256Ks. And if you are going to use the premium tier, the maximum message size is going to be 1 mega. And similarly, Azure Service Bus Topics, which is exactly the same limits as Azure Service Bus Queues. And finally, we have Azure Event Hub, which supports maximum message size to be 256Ks. So those are the different limits for different Azure Service Bus technologies, and bottom line is there is a limit we cannot exceed, and the maximum limit we can use is 1 mega if we are going to use a premium tier for Azure Service Bus queues. And if you are in a situation that you want to send a really large message content or a large file on your message that exceeds the 1 mega, it's going to be a problem for your architecture and probably it's not going to work. Now let's get back to our example and see how we can use the claim check pattern to solve this problem. And what we are going to do is to introduce a blob storage or even a database or any other external storage that you would like to use. So when the publisher wants to send a really large file in a message, the publisher is going to send it in a different way. The publisher is going to split this message into two parts, the payload and the claim check. The payload in this case is the large file that we are talking about. So the publisher is going to store this large file directly into a blob storage, while keeping a reference to this file and put it in the message before putting it in the message queue. And then from the other side, when the subscriber receives this message, it will be able to get this file from the blob storage as well. So what we have done so far is we allowed our Azure Service Bus to able to process large files with the help of blob storage or any other external service like a SQL database, for example. And by doing this, we have overcome the Azure Service Bus limits we have just talked about in the previous slide. At the same time, we are allowing our solution to be able to process and handle large files through messaging architecture, with an assurance that it's not gonna slow down the entire solution, because what we are putting in the message is just a reference to the actual file location in the blob storage. That's exactly what this pattern is about. Now let's talk about some considerations you need to be aware of when you use this pattern. You need to consider the deletion strategy of those messages that you are going to store in the blob storage, if you are not planning to archive them. And primarily, there are two approaches you can follow, either to delete these messages synchronously, so when the subscriber receives a certain message and processes the file from the blob storage, then the subscriber will go ahead and delete this file from the blob storage. And definitely it's gonna add a little bit more overhead and latency on the consumer to clean this up. Also, you can delete the messages asynchronously to be running in a dedicated separate process, to avoid having any overload or overhead or latency on the consumer side. Also, you need to be aware of that storing and retrieving files from a blob storage or any other external service might cause an overhead or latency to your solution. And one way you can overcome this is by checking your message size before moving forward. If your message size is small enough and way under the limits of Azure Service Bus Queue, then feel free to submit your message to the Azure Service Bus Queue directly, even though it might contain a small file. While if your message size is going to be over the limits of Azure Service Bus Queues, then you need to consider implementing the claim check pattern and storing the file in a blob storage and keep its reference in the message before sending it to the Azure Service Bus Queue. Now let's see when you should use this pattern. Whenever your message size is going to be way larger than the message limits of the message bus technology you are going to use. We've already seen the different limits of different Azure Service Bus components, and whenever a message size is going to exceed this limit, you need to consider implementing this pattern. You have no other option, otherwise the messages cannot be fit into the service bus if they are going to be over limit. Also, when you want to enforce security to your solution and make sure that only publisher and subscriber are only able to access a certain file in the blob storage. Now we are coming to the end of this video. I hope now it's clear for you what the claim check pattern is about, how we can use it, when we should use it, how we can use it to overcome the limitations of any message bus technology, how it can contribute to improve the performance and reliability of our application. And we have also talked about different use cases you need to be aware of to implement this pattern. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any question, please put it in the comments below. And thanks for watching.